never had met before. And
so I'm kind of mad at her, like, where have you been all my life? Okay, I just want a full disclosure. Yeah, like,
I love you to pieces.
yeah.
So we have mostly planned all this online and met for the first time this weekend, really, physically.
Totally. Yeah.
But we've got a really cool kind of thing. I'm Kathy Amsden, and I have been a social worker for over 40 years, and being in palliative care for the last 10 or so, really have a mission in my mind to how we move palliative care forward in our community in Maine, and with a full multidisciplinary team. So I was really excited to take on the task today of teaching about the domains of care out of the quality standards. That book that you saw, that she saw online, this has been pretty much a Bible for me. And all the folks that I work with and do training with at Androscoggin Home Care and Hospice, this has been assigned to them to read. There's an online version. I do have handouts for you up here, and if I could get some helpers to hand those out, that would be great. There's 3. I go to my team. I told them to come because I needed help. So we really are using those domains of care, but we're going to be putting those in action today, so that and we're going to do it around a case. And here you go.
Do I start my case?
No,
I just say who I am.
I
am, yeah. So I'm Kirsten Scorpin. I've been a social worker for about 35 years in all different kinds of arenas, but the past 10 years or so, I was a hospice social worker, and now I'm part of the inpatient team at Midcoast Hospital as a palliative care social worker, but I always say I'm a hospice and a palliative care social worker because that's my identity. And my team's not here, except Andy's on my team, so I'm happy. He's here. Yeah. No, I'm delighted. I was just talking with my team this morning while we were having breakfast, and I haven't told Kathy yet because I have a new career for her. But one of my missions is to particularly create pathways for social workers to get into this field, because we're kind of in a crisis, and a lot of us are aging out, so to speak, that have the experience. So that's my full disclosure. I'm on a mission, and I know Kathy is too, as an educator. So we're really happy you guys are here, and we are going to share a case, and Andy will know this case. So, but I changed names. But yeah, so, okay.
So we do not have any financial gains that we would have from presenting this to you today, and whatever other disclosures I'm supposed to say about that, we're free from that, and
consider yourself disclosed.
And we're got that one. We check that little box. All right. So we hope that when you get done today, you'll know those 8 domains of care in the national standards. If you know them already. Not the national guidelines of the Consensus Project. If you know them already, we hope you'll know them deeper about how we might apply them, not just in palliative care, but the vision that when we talked about this is that with the broken healthcare system, that we have the opportunity to hopefully rebuild, and that we think that we should rebuild with this model of care. That this shouldn't just be specialty palliative care, but it should be this model of care for all of healthcare. Now, if I can have whatever dream I want to have, but if I could have a wish and have that come true, it would clearly be that we could have this, and it would be real, and that this is what we would fund. And it is fully and truly multidisciplinary, because people are whole, and all these parts all need to be considered when we're thinking about taking care of people.
Which I thought was illustrated beautifully in today's piece on spiritual care. It was just such a reminder of that, yeah.
We can't leave that piece out.
No, and we have to own that piece ourselves too. I just think that was yeah.
Absolutely. So we would like to know who you all are. So what we're going to do is introduce the domains of care up on the stage, and then ask you to be thinking about where am I most applying my day-to-day functions? where would I stand? I know they're interrelated, but where would I stand based on my role? Where would I fit mostly in this domain for most of my time? So we have, the first is the structural and processes. I call them operational processes of care, the first domain. And that has all kinds of standards about helping to establish the multidisciplinary teams, keep them going, keep people educated, offer team support. We provide comprehensive assessments, plans, ways of constructing that and doing that wherever we're working, ways to follow up on our care plans with patients, being able to really stand by the continuity, communication, and coordination of care, and to provide care across settings. We want to look at quality improvement projects that we need to do in our systems, as well as providing stability, sustainability, and growth. So this kind of, in my view, that domain is that overall structure. How do we do this? How do we set this up? And what are the parts? And how do we keep it going? So that is, so do I fit in that? Do I, most of my time spent kind of managing and program management and development, or running IDTs. The next, and you've got your wonderful wheel that was passed out. That's one of my favorite handouts. It's not exactly the 8 domains exactly, so I've kind of gone with the clinical practice guideline standards from the Consensus Project with that wheel, and I kind of combine things, but I really like it, and I use it a lot to describe the domains of care. So the physical aspects of care. So this it can include disease management, symptom management, assessment of the total pain. You know, we really do need to look at total pain, but a lot of times with the functional, with the physical aspects of care, we're looking at how is a person functioning, what's their mental status, what is that physical pain, what are some treatment interventions that I'm going to do around that, what's the collaboration of care that I need to do with other providers, and how are we going to have ongoing monitoring of that. So really thinking about, do I fit in my day, do I do most of this, physical aspects of care? Then, let's go over here to the psychological, and I say emotional aspects of care. So this one is, how much distress am I feeling emotionally? What are some of my strengths and how am I coping? How am I dealing with internal things like grief and loss? Do I have some kind of mental health situation or substance abuse situation going on? What is my suicidal risk? What anxiety, fear, depression, self-esteem, personality, behavioral, and resilience? So how am I made up? How do some of those things help me with addressing my serious illness or my illness in general, and what really is I could use some help with. So those psychological and emotional aspects of care. And a close one to that is the social aspects of care. And this domain, I added from your wheel the practical aspects of care. I think we really think about this as being what's our role, what's our relationship, what's changed as a result of our serious illness or our getting ill, our getting sick. This is a broader healthcare kind of view. What's changed about our roles, our functions, basic things like what can I do for myself now and not do for myself? Am I earning money? Is my family having problems because I can't earn money? So those financial aspects of care. Just the practical things like who can take care of me if I can't do something for myself. I think this also, we look at this from the social aspects of care do intertwine for me, but I am a social worker, so I see it very intertwined. It's very hard for me to separate it. But, and it is for everybody, but I really do think that we do think about those kinds of roles, responsibilities, connections, and how do we deal with the social determinants of health to be able to move forward to help someone out who may be stuck. Let's see. But we're constantly dealing with, we're looking even at mental capacity. We're looking at those psychological aspects of care. But when we're thinking about social needs and socially how we're functioning, that's what that aspect of care is. Spiritual aspects of care, we learned a great deal about that this morning already, right? This has very much been covered. But she put a slide up there, and I make it pretty simple when I think about what's our sense of purpose, our sense of meaning, our connection. What's our unfinished business? What kind of legacy have we, what's been our life? And what kind of legacy do we want to leave? It's kind of like when we're talking about as we're getting older as social workers. Yeah. What are we leaving behind here? What's important for us to do? I think about strengths being inner, outer, and upper strengths. And so the inner strengths being those psychological ones, that's internal ones, right? The outer being the social. This is the upper to me. What are those higher power strengths? And when I think about assessing somebody, I actually have that model in my mind as part of my assessment. And so what are those connections? What is a daily practice? What's our beliefs, our values? What matters most? Just really brief kind of thinking about spiritual aspects of care and assessing those. Cultural aspects of care, again, it fits, what are my beliefs? What are my values? What traditions? Who am I from generations and of ancestors before me? Who am I? What have I brought into what matters most to me in relationship to how I'm treated or how others treat me? I love this story this morning about the pearl. There was a family at a facility where the family was a Vietnamese family, as I recall, as well. And we couldn't understand a lot of language, but we finally got to the core issue, was what mattered most is that this person who had severe dementia and couldn't swallow, that she eat. And they kept, eat, you've got to have food in you. What we finally figured out, after getting an interpreter and working that through and working through the language barriers, that they really felt that she could not die with a hungry ghost, as a hungry ghost. She would have, she would not be free. She had to have something in her stomach, or she would become a hungry ghost. So we had to figure out how to make sure, so it's, what about swabs? Okay, can we dip a swab in a little bit of milk and put it on her tongue? Yeah, we can do that, and the facility, of course, has to go along with this as well. But that became really clear how you got through a block with where this was going, was to figure out where the cultural piece was. Gender, sexual orientation, our class, our race, our religion, our appearance, our abilities, all part of looking at cultural aspects of care. And again, our historical experiences, our trauma, where have we come from? Are we immigrants? We're all immigrants, actually, except for the Native American indigenous people. But what are our teaching, our medical, what has happened to us in our medical beliefs? So many pieces about culture that we really need to think about and assess and know in those aspects of care. Our ethical and legal aspects of care, I think of this often in advanced care planning, doing advanced directives, PULSE, who's the surrogate, who's the POA, dealing with conflicts and goals of care, being able to deal with interventions in relationship to, I call it social injustice, frankly, in terms of people who have opportunities, people who don't. How do we deal with our ethical dilemmas around that? This concept of do no harm, and as Jim was talking about today, am I doing harm or not doing harm in relationship to prescribing? We're constantly, a nurse this week was distraught because of this person she didn't have to leave behind in the home because they didn't have any caregivers. This happens all the time, especially and as we don't have enough support. So that's what I'm talking about social justice issues around what do we have for some people, and some people have absolutely nothing. And there's so much moral distress going on in our teams surrounding what kinds of circumstances that we're working in home-based settings especially. But the case today is very much, has
Yes,
a lot
I
of
think
elements
it'll
of this in it.
illustrate.
Yeah. So dealing, with safety issues. Safety is an interesting one from lots of perspectives of adult protective, when do we refer, when do we not? I mean, so those legal and ethical aspects of care are throughout here. So that is our 8 domains. And I'd like you to come on up and place yourself where you think you most fit in what you're doing in this line of work. So come on up and be careful on the steps. Yes, you have to choose one. Yes. I tried to place some close to each other.
Like, I wanna go.
Because they really, but where it's maybe an ascribed role. Oh. Oh, yeah, I know, good, that's fine too.
Yeah.
It's about choosing
I know.
the most closest of what you see based on your role.
Yeah.
You don't see that you have a role up there.
I don't.
You just, yeah.
All 3 of these? Oh, no. Can we like?
Let's throw my shoe over there too.
Twister.
Throwing my shoe.
But I do say, well, look at that. What do you think?
I'm actually retired,
Oh.
but I do some social stuff, so I can go social.
And volunteers are, social is right over on that purple one, yes. Okay, now let's introduce yourselves and what brought you to where you stand. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Thank
I'm
you.
Sarah Karen. I'm the palliative care social worker at Central Maine Medical Center in Worcester. I feel like these 3 are my biggest role at the hospital as a social worker. Deal a lot with family dynamics and patients and spirituality and holding space for the people that I care for.
Thank you, Sarah.
Barb Sinclair, I'm a retired clinical health psychologist, so I worked in medical settings, not psychiatric. And I've been a hospice volunteer for 18 years. So psychological, emotional, and practical aspects of what
She's got her legs
what
spread.
but the patient needs as well as all the other part in hospice.
Thank you.
I'm Jen Reeder. I'm an LCS WO in Skagen. I work on the intermittent rehab team and then in the palliative care teams. And I'm like this half of this world.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to throw my shoes over there and
Whatever you have to show up with.
Yeah.
Whatever you have to show up with. Very good.
I'm Chris Corvo, and I'm a retired hospice director. I've worked with many of you before, and I am currently driving people through Harpswell. You can volunteer to be a driver to medical appointments, and there's a lot of social and emotional support that you give people during the time you're taking them out. And then you're listening a lot to what their doctor recommended when they get out of their appointments and, procedures and whatnot. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of.
Gets to use all those skill sets
Exactly.
in a volunteer role that's very critical to social needs, transportation.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
I'm Elizabeth Keene. I'm currently in healthcare administration, but my background is as a hospice chaplain, pediatric and adult hospice, and then pediatric palliative care as a bereavement coordinator.
I'm John Boydwitz. I'm a family doctor and integrative medicine practitioner. I work in Auburn now, and I've been doing hospice work with my patients for forever, but I place myself here just because I try to meet people where they are. I've been really deeply involved with medical cannabis before we even had laws, in the state. So I've been helping people, figure out how to do that in their end-of-life care for a long time. And actually this morning I'm late because one of my patients, who's an old-time friend, called me last night and wanted to set up hospice care. Who has not, she has breast cancer, and she has not done anything conventional. And she's just at the point now, after 8 years, that she needs comfort. So I had to coordinate with the family and her to get things going so the hospice can come into the house.
So
Probably
really
on Monday.
embracing diversity and being really able, when you were talking, I was thinking about really listening to the patient's goals of care, what matters most to the patient, and really figuring out where you fit in that. You're coming from that cultural place very deeply. Thank you.
And he's a wonderful doctor.
I second that.
Oh, because of nice, what we call sociometry, which means the connection in the group.
I'm Andy Sokoloff. I'm bereavement coordinator at Chan's Home Health and Hospice and social worker. So I just did end-of-life care because that was really all of these are relevant to what I do, except maybe the more physical aspects of care. But I think that's the point of the exercise. It was supposed to be hard to choose.
Thank you so much.
And I feel your struggle. I'm Kathy Alexander, Palliative Navigator with Maine Center for Palliative Medicine, which is offered by Anderson Home Health. But there are many friends in this circle who gave me my start and have worked with me over the years. And I identify with every category. I feel like I have multiple personalities here because each phase of my career in healthcare has been within each of these domains in different roles, as volunteer, as a group facilitator, as a hospice and end-of-life nurse, working with elders, and ultimately landing in my current role.
Thank you, Kathy. And you're an RN.
Yes, I'm an RN, I'm sorry. See, that is probably so important, but I consider that just to be incidental to the rest of the work.
Thank you.
Kim Murray, I'm a nurse care manager at Martins Point Healthcare. I'm also a cancer survivor, and I primarily am building, or have been building over the years, an oncology program. So I primarily follow oncology patients. So very much like yourself, I try to touch upon each area in our initial assessments. What does the patient want? Where do they want their care? What's preventing their care? What obstacles? We assess the behavioral health, and we have social workers that I love to work with that will also assist and manage the patients with me. So, yeah.
Teresa Letelier. So I'm a family medicine doctor and a palliative care doctor for Martins Point. So I have this really cool opportunity. I've been there about 2 years to kind of, collaborate as a PCP and a palliative care outpatient doctor. So I do a lot of the physical stuff. I'm hoping I can kind of move my way in that direction. But it's been really cool to see both patients in both settings.
Chris Turner, I'm the Associate Vice President for Hospice and Palliative Care for Northern White Home Care and Hospice. And I've spent a lot of time in the end-of-life care section, but currently overseeing both of those programs in our statewide location, and all things that come with being an administrator.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm Andrew Thatcher. Thank you for this model. John knows that I subscribe to this completely. I have been working as a self-appointed steward of something called Seed to Health, which we created to start to try and look at how you can, in a more systematic but very deeply human perspective, connect plant medicines, therapeutics, whatever you wish, to people's experiences so that we can start to learn with them and from them in a very safe and private way. And if I were a better student in my earlier days and I'd gone into medicine, I hope I would have picked palliative care, and I would have just as confused as the rest of you as to where to align myself, because it's the whole person.
Yeah.
It is the
That's
whole
the
person.
plan.
And we may be in ascribed roles or chosen roles, but it is the trueness of how we are all needing to be generalists in all areas, even though we may specialize in one. So how important this care is for our patients. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves. You can take a break now, but we're going to ask you to come back up in a moment in order to, because we're going to present our case next. And we're having you think about these domains of care and thinking about how we're going to help this patient. All right? So thank you so much. How many people have, while you're going back down there safely on those steps, how many people have read or really have some knowledge of these clinical guidelines? So if you haven't, it's just really a wonderful way in which to really understand these aspects. Which chair would you like, dear, and how would you like to be?
Wherever you want. I just was like really impressed too how the circle really became a circle. I mean, that the way the bodies went around and we were.
We represented
we
all
had good
areas.
Yeah.
And so as you step into the role, Kirsten is now going to be Jennifer. And she's stepping into the role of Jennifer as the patient. And I feel like I want to shut the door. So if somebody could way up at the end do that, it just feels like it's the right thing to do to kind of bring us in. So it's interesting that Kirsten, moving into the role of Jennifer, was curious about you all. And she was curious about, wow, this is very interesting. I wonder about all of these and how they might be able to be helpful to me. I'm curious as I move into that role. So Jennifer, I'm really here to help you along in your telling your story today, and being able to have other people be listening as well, and be witness to your experience in healthcare, your experience with a serious illness, and what you need to speak about what that was like for you. And tell us your story. So we're really here to listen. I'll ask some questions along the way if you need some help with that, but you know your story best. And we are so honored that you are able to be here to share it with us today. And then we're going to be thinking about what we might be able to help with, or what we're noticing, at least what we saw, what we recognized, what we witnessed about your story. Okay, so let's,
Okay. My name is Jennifer Moss, and I am 49 years old. I grew up in California and ended up in Maine 10 or 15 years ago. About 6 years ago, I started to notice my body changing. And I seemed really imbalanced and was losing my balance. At that point, I was a CNA, and I wanted to be a social worker, so I was going part-time to school. I saw a doctor, being a CNA too, and being a student, healthcare, being able to see a doctor was really hard. So I did see somebody, but they didn't think too much of it. A couple of years pushed forward, my back pain, I was getting enormous back pain. But I was in a really serious accident about 20 years ago, so I thought, well, this is kind of the aftermath of that.
Jen, you also said to me when we were getting ready for this that you also didn't follow up because you didn't have health insurance.
No, I did not. I did not, and I kept applying for Maine Care once I established my residency in Maine, but I never, Maine Care is really complicated and I didn't follow through, and there wasn't anybody to help me follow through. Yeah, but, you know, then fast forward a couple years, I began to fall and I was having headaches, and I could tell my speech was really changing too. People were having I know you can understand me today, but then it probably would have been really hard to understand me. And they thought, well, it's like I'm falling a lot, so they called it kind of a post-concussion syndrome. So again, and then a couple years ago, I got access to, I really wasn't right, and I pushed the system. I got an MRI, but there was no findings. So they thought, well, maybe you have MS, which was terrifying. And there is MS in my family, and I thought, okay, well, and if I did have MS, I decided at that point, I had my truck, and I had my dog, Chance, and he and I got in the truck, and we went out. One of my things I really wanted to do was lay under the stars in the desert. So I drove out there by myself with hardly any money in my sleeping bag, and Chance and I slept under the stars in the desert. But I wasn't feeling well. I didn't want to go to California where my family was, so I came back to Maine, drove back.
You and Chance?
Me and Chance.
Tell us a little bit about Chance.
Chance was my rescue dog, and he's my family. I don't have a relationship really with my family. I have a former boyfriend who I kind of stay in touch with, but we broke up because my health issues were just, and he has a substance use disorder and really decided he needed to work on his own sobriety, and that I was. So, and I was staying with a friend's Airbnb, but that ran out, and so, you know, I like my truck and I like my sleeping bag, so I found a barn and I was living in this barn.
You and Chance?
Me and Chance, yeah. And it got to be November, so it started to get cold. One of the physician's office I saw hooked me up with a social service agency out of Portland, so I was assigned a case manager, and she would come see me periodically. And the day came when she thought I should go to the ED because it was cold. I really wasn't feeling well. I was losing the ability to take care of myself. I went to the ED. There was no diagnosis, so they discharged me, and I went back to the barn with Chance. Meanwhile, they were trying to get me, this doctor's office in Western Maine was trying to get me down to Boston to see a neurologist to try to figure out what's going on with me. But at that point, I'd lost my truck. I didn't have any transportation, and my Maine Care still wasn't in place, so they weren't willing to see me. I was on the list, but so someone said, well, there's this doctor at Midcoast, Dr. Taylor, who's a neurologist. I hadn't met him before, but I called their social worker from his office called me and said, I think you better go to the ED again. And I went to the ED again, and case management and a social worker came down and saw me in the ED because they were alerted that I was coming in and that I was homeless. And at that point, I was admitted. I didn't really have there was nothing they could do for me, but I was what they call a social admit. So.
Did we have any clarification on your diagnosis yet?
Finally, my symptoms advanced so much that they had decided at that point I had ALS. Yeah.
And who decided that?
The neurologist's office in Brunswick. Yeah. And they still wanted me, and I wanted to go to Boston though for a second opinion. And I was pushing the social worker at the hospital. I need to get down there. Again, my Maine Care wasn't in place,
But you were in the hospital.
Yeah, I didn't want to be in the hospital. I wanted to go back to the barn with my sleeping bag and my dog.
You were worried about what was going on with Chance.
Chance. So my former boyfriend said he would take care of Chance, but then he said, I can't sustain this because I have to focus on myself and my sobriety, which is, I understand. But, so I needed someone to take care of Chance, so then when I got out of the hospital and got my own apartment, Chance and I could go back together.
And that was your goal, was to get,
Oh, I was going back, I'm on a voucher list. I'm gonna, yeah, get an apartment and get some helpers. And I had a Gould assessment, they gave me 18 hours a week, which I think is fine.
Right.
Yeah, they just don't have any workers right now. But, yeah, no, I'm going to, and I can't really dial my phone, but my social worker's helping me call these places that might take my voucher.
and your goal is to go home, you and Chance?
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
to be independent
Yeah.
and not in the hospital?
right. And then go get down to Boston,
And
because I'm gonna live.
because that's
Yeah.
your goal, is to live.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. No, I'm 49 years old, and, yeah, and I want to finish school, and I want to rescue more animals.
That's, what about the animals and the rescuing of the animals is important to you? Something about out west? Is there something out west?
Out west, well, I have, one of my goal is, I need to get to Canada too, because, as you can see with my t-shirt and all my clothes, I am a fan of these two guys who run a sanctuary up in Canada, and they brought in Esther the Wonder Pig, and they've saved her, and I do get some disability money, some money, and that all goes to the sanctuary in Canada, because that's my, yeah, to take care of.
Is that important to you
It's very important to me, yeah, yeah, animals, so. So Dennis can't take care of Chance, but the case manager said she'd just foster Chance, and I'm upset about that, because I wish, and they're bringing him to the hospital to see me, but I just decided the other day that every time Chance comes in now, he cries at the door, and I can't. I don't want Chance to come visit anymore. It's midwinter, spring is coming. I gotta let that go.
And your old boyfriend, does he come at all?
Well, it's COVID, and he lives 2 hours away, so he can come for 30-minute visits, and he has been coming when he can. But
What about the family? I mean, your family in California?
I have family in California, and the social worker really was encouraging me to seek them out and let them know what was going on. And my sister's my MPOA. She's really bossy. She's my older sister. But I called my parents. They're both older. I'm the youngest. And they said if I can get out there, they'll take care of me in their home. So I thought, that would be probably good to go home, and that I could take Chance with me too. So that happened, and then the next day my sister called and said, my parents absolutely can't, but because of their frailties, they can't take care of me. So my social worker was looking for hospice houses, because I learned about hospice in social work school, and one of the social workers from Gosnell had come to speak in my class, and they said they'd take anybody, I want to get to Gosnell. The team's telling me here that I don't qualify. And my social worker looked, and there were no facilities in a range of my parents' house. And now people are saying I can't fly. I just said, so I'm upset. And now they're talking about moving me to a nursing home because I have to get out of the hospital.
And you've now been in the hospital. I know the first time they didn't admit you. I think you had told me that it was COVID and there wasn't any beds.
No.
So that's partially why you also went home with no diagnosis
Yeah.
that first time around. But this time, now you've been in the hospital how long?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
And what's that been like?
Well, I don't like it. The staff comes in, they're always taking doing my vitals. I just want to be left alone, and I want it to be dark in my room. And I need to get to my apartment in Portland. So one of the women said they were holding it, and so I need someone to help me call them again. And then they come in and say they found a place for me across. I'm not familiar with Brunswick, but I'm going a couple miles away over to a nursing home. But I'm not going unless I have my own room. So then they found me my own room, and I haven't been outside in 3 months, and so it's really. I really didn't want to go. My social worker went with me, and they made arrangements for, the other thing I wanted before I go to was to get a feeding tube, because I'm not gonna die.
Right,
Yeah.
and you were having trouble with your
It's
nutrition, you were
really hard.
losing a lot of weight
Yeah.
and really
I
having
can't
trouble
really
staying.
swallow, or, yeah. So I went with my feeding tube over to this nursing home, and then they got the hospice team involved over at the nursing home. But I'm not gonna die, I'm going to have my feeding tube, and, but I was having some pain, so they said they would help me, with the pain. And then I didn't like that room. I know I had my own room, but I didn't like anything about it, and I didn't wanna wear clothes, so I stopped wearing any clothes. It just was too hard for me.
What is it?
I just couldn't tolerate anything on my skin, and people weren't putting my stuff the way I like it. Like my pillow needs to be just angled,
And at this point, you couldn't express yourself so that people would understand you in terms of words. How did you express this distress?
So initially when I went over there, I was able to express some, but then my social worker helped me get a board, but that pissed me off, and I was really frustrated to use that board. So my hospice nurse could kind of understand me, and so she helped with translation some, but a lot of times people didn't understand. So I would just, as I lost my language, I wasn't going to die. I was stuck in this room, and my body was hurting, and I screamed a lot, and that they didn't like that either. Yeah.
And you didn't want them to come in and take care
No.
of, touch you or
No.
wash you up or clean you up or anything?
I couldn't. No. I just wanted to
You're
be
so
left
unhappy.
alone. Yeah, and then someone showed me a picture of Chance. He got adopted, and he was on a couch, and I was upset because Chance got what I wanted. He got a couch and a family, and I don't have that. Yeah.
So you had a lot to scream about.
Yeah.
And it was the only way you could really say and express
Yeah.
what you were feeling inside, and that nobody could really understand what you were feeling. But a little bit from the hospice nurse.
Yeah.
Sounds like
She was good.
she
was
felt
good.
like she would sit with
Yeah.
you, and somehow you would feel some comfort or
And she
understanding.
would stay. She would do, stay for a while and help me. And some of the aides were good, and some of them weren't. They were getting mad at me, and I was getting mad at them. And then things were just.
So how is things going with your health as you stayed at the nursing home? What kind of hospice was involved now? Did you have any other contact? I know you were pissed off at your sister and you didn't want her to be POA anymore.
No, my
but-
social worker, I made her then bring that into my room and tear it up in front of me,
Yeah.
because I wanted to make sure she wasn't. And the Catholic chaplain would visit me periodically, and she was okay. And then Father O'Donnell came, and I got sacraments of the sick, and I was completely naked. I never wore clothes anymore. And he sang Amazing Grace, and that was good. That was comforting. Yes. So
did you ever see your family? I mean, did they come to
towards,
or
I
any
think
other
I
connection?
remember towards the end, my sisters came. My parents were too frail, and every time they tried to help me FaceTime them, it just, my parents would cry and I couldn't speak. So, but my two sisters and a niece did come, and then they started telling me, then they went back home again, and they started telling me my feeding tube was creating more problems than it was.
Who's
helping
the
me.
they?
The doctor and the nurse, but I was still in charge, and so they had an ethics meeting about it, and but eventually I faded enough, and they started to take the feeding tube away. But I still, I still didn't want to die. And then my sister and niece came, and that was in late fall, and that was okay, that they came, and there was some, and Danny, my boyfriend, was visiting more when he could. And then they took the feeding tube out, and 22 days later, after the feeding tube was taken out, I did die, but I didn't want to die.
So who made the decision to take the feeding tube out? Sounds like they were recommending it.
When I wasn't able to speak anymore, and in agreement with the hospice team and my family, they made that decision.
But it was not your decision?
No.
You were going to live?
I was going to live, yeah. Then I got really tired, and was in my bed all the time,
And then you died?
and I died. Yeah, I died December 2nd, 2020.
And your journey had started in the hospital?
It was almost a year
Almost a year.
from the admission to the ED to the nursing home. Yeah, I still didn't have money here, so I don't know who took care of that.
Those bills?
Yeah.
You don't know how that ended up?
Yeah, my family was worried that they were gonna, but the staff told them that they weren't in charge of that. Yeah.
Anything that we've missed in the telling of your story that just taken a moment before we see what this circle of strengths can do for us, or do for you, or could have done? Anything that we've missed in your story that you think is significant?
I guess I really wish that early on, people, that I could get health care, and that I could have had a relationship with someone that made the journey with me. I feel like, once the hospice team got involved, they made that journey. And I died really, I'm mad. Yeah. I know about ALS. I'm bright, but it sucks that everybody else has resources and I didn't. When this happens, money matters. That's bad.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and for giving voice to this experience. So we're going to turn to the audience now. And I think if you're okay with staying in the role, just to take in what people have to say from the role, and then we'll get you out of that. And we'll switch roles in that one. All right. So everybody hopefully was able to hear and take that in. So it would be more meaningful if you could come up here if you have something to say, but and take a position. But if you feel like in the moment, let's just we've got about 10 minutes before we're done. So in the next 5 minutes, what were some of the things that you heard that are significant from these domains that you're thinking about in terms of how and what could have made a difference? You heard Jennifer say at the end, what might have made a difference for me is if we could have moved upstream. We talk about this a lot in palliative care, moving upstream, goals of care conversations, interventions, but really, interestingly, upstream, she was in the system for some time, but there were some social determinants of health, right, that were absolutely not addressed in this situation, very much so. And so I'm curious about the other dimensions, and maybe that one too. What are some thoughts from you all around what you saw and what you heard, so that while Jennifer's still in role, she might take in some of your thoughts? How did you listen well? So many aspects of care. Just go ahead.
We didn't help her complete the main
Let's speak up
care-
nice and loud.
We didn't help her complete the main care application.
Apparently not. There's probably roadblocks to finances or roadblocks to, I don't know what happened with that, but somehow that main care application didn't go through. Yes.
There are definitely delays in diagnosis and access to any specialist in primary care. So there was no advocacy for her from a medical practitioner, and certainly access to a specialist was attempted, but it took a long time.
And when you give this feedback, give it directly to Jennifer. So I am sorry, or I feel like you missed out, or just really let her hear that. So you would say, we failed you. We did not have, you didn't have anyone to be your advocate, to be someone to watch out for you, to speak up, to look out for you. And why was that, do you think?
I guess there was sort of a disconnect about what her needs really, what your needs really were, and how to best serve you and connect you with the right people. I think people were in a problem-solving mode about the moment, but I don't think people stood back enough to say how could we create a better team approach. And it was so episodic that when you were in crisis, people came around you, but the follow-through was lacking.
Coordinated care, lack of coordinated care, and no insurance. No insurance. Yes?
The very first thing I heard was about where she was living. And it's very difficult to deal with your medical issues when you don't have a stable home environment. So addressing that, getting a roof over her head so that she could then start really focusing on her health issues.
And that roof became a hospital.
Yes.
Because we didn't have any way to find
I mean, that's a
housing.
society's.
This is a major society issue,
Yeah.
one that is, Sarah, and I'm coming to you.
Jennifer, it sounds like nobody was your voice when you didn't have one. You didn't hold space for what was important to you. And so your verbalization was screaming. I'm sad that somebody didn't document for you what your wishes and your needs were in those moments when you had a voice. So that knowing that that is a possibility that you would lose your ability to speak. But if somebody could have just written down, these are the things that are important to me, right? And also looking at, you have a dog that was your lifeline, and trying to protect that dog in those moments, but who protected you? And so those are the things that made me sad and wished that somebody would have taken the initiative to do those pieces.
And in fairness, I think different people along my path late in the game tried, but that really pissed me off because I wasn't going to die.
And I am sad that they didn't acknowledge your strength, right? That this is, I'm determined, this is what I'm going to do. And nobody's hearing me physically, spiritually, there's that level.
And my hospice nurse got it. Yeah, and advocated for me. Yeah.
And I think I feel sad too that, I think going back to not having the point person medical advocate that the overall trajectory and prognosis of ALS was not shared with you, when you could communicate, when you had some, maybe functional abilities to kind of live out some of those important things for you. And, while always holding on to hope that, yes, you are going to live, yes, you are going to live, but also, what else do you hope the time you have left and understanding truly what that prognosis is supposed to be?
So that you're not fully understanding the disease progression and management. Yeah.
Yeah, and once I got hospitalized, through no one's fault, but neurology checked out, and, yeah.
When there's no more things we can do for you,
Yeah.
except for put maybe the feeding tube, then we don't have anything for you. Any other thoughts out here, what you witnessed? On the spiritual dimension, please, yes.
Yeah, Jennifer, I admire that you got to fulfill your dream of driving out to the desert and sleeping under the stars with Chance. And I hope that is a memory that sustained you during some of the difficult times. And I was glad to hear that you found some comfort in having the Father Donald come to do the anointing and to sing with you. I just wonder if there are other things that you think might have helped you in that longing to stay connected to this life and how you were finding your purpose. Are there other things that we could have done to help you with that?
You know, I wish someone would have helped me connect with the sanctuary in Canada so that I could have FaceTimed them and met Esther the Wonder Pig. And those of you who don't know Esther the Wonder Pig, please Google her up. She's an amazing creature, and she has these two dads, and they're doing amazing work. And I actually, I'm going to give my hospital social worker, she loved Esther the Wonder Pig too, and so that we had that in common. And I'm giving her my Esther the Wonder Pig pillow, which is the first time in one of the visits that I even acknowledged that there may be a time when I don't need that pillow.
We missed that a little, but the sanctuary, yes. We had two more, right? I think right here you were first.
I was sad that we didn't work more. Really a couple of things that maybe trying to get you home more and closer to family during that crucial time. I mean, there's Angel Med Flight, there's all kinds of different options. I didn't hear those mentioned. And also I was thinking of the sanctuary, how we could wrap that in for you. And also that even though Chance was adopted, was there any contact to say, hey, would you mind continuing this relationship and having Chance come visit? So those make me sad.
And saying, the piece for me, I'm thinking of bereavement, and I'm thinking about that saying goodbye to Chance. That last closure with Chance was Chance at the door, crying, and then you made the decision to not see Chance again. But I don't know if there was closure or not with Chance. And I wondered about the closure with your sister, that you got pissed off with the closure with your family. Did you feel like there was closure, or was there unfinished business still with family and with Chance?
I think there was, I don't know, I think in my heart of hearts I knew Chance needed a home and found a home and found kids. And I think at the end, my sister and Dennis were at my bedside when I made my departure. So I think I'm sad I didn't see my parents, but my family did show up, and yeah, the social workers were off, and the nurse was often saying to me, you know, home is where the love is, and sometimes it's not a physical place, it's the people. And I was skeptical, but I part of me took that in. Yeah.
So when we can't get maybe the social strengths that we needed, or maybe we're running out of strengths inside, there was some kind of a higher power strength that you begin to get curious about and begin to believe in a little bit. Yes, we had one more up here though first. Go ahead. We've got about 2 minutes after. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm sorry and also aghast that we didn't talk to you and ask you about removing the feeding tube.
What?
Removing the feeding tube.
That it was somebody else's decision?
Eventually my body rejected it.
Oh.
It just that, yeah, it
I
just.
thought I heard you say that.
And it was removed ultimately, but they were decreasing the feedings because I was getting, they kept telling me I was getting a lot of edema and my body wasn't able to absorb the nutrition. But it was a very complicated.
But you could not make the decision yourself to remove that. It sounds
No.
like, I was gonna
No.
live, I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
die. It
yeah.
stayed right up to the last breath.
Yeah, and I stayed on the housing list.
And you stayed on that housing list to the last breath. And that mattered.
I was just going to say, first of all, I feel like I'm cheating a little bit. Dennis is doing well, by the way. I'm sorry that so many of us, and I would spread this out to society, did not find a way to talk with you that was very effective. Sort of, not only throughout the journey, but throughout the life. And I wonder if, that was also really hard for your family. And obviously for you, because you have to live it. But the other thing, and I'm not quite sure how to ask this, I was standing on the end of Life Square. And this may sound like a really strange question, but what is it specifically about dying that is upsetting? Now, we say death, and it's like, that's a huge thing. But if you're able to break down this specific thing, I don't get to be with my animals, for example, or I don't know that my life was important, for example, or I'm really scared because it's just unknown. Rather than sort of as the huge whole thing, but is there something specific that was so upsetting or scary or sad or terrifying for you?
I think that's a really good question. I think my sense is people tried to talk to me about that, and in full disclosure, I should say that I have Asperger's, significant. So even when I was healthy, communication and the nuances of life were always very complicated for me. And I think being 49 years old, I really wanted to, I liked being a CNA, I really wanted to be a social worker, and I really wanted, there were still animals I needed to save. I was young.
You got screwed,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and I'm pissed off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanted to live.
And I didn't have a good way of processing that, the anger, yeah. And I think for people taking care of me, ALS is a really scary disease for all of us. And I think being 40, taking care of someone who's 49, it was scary for people. I was just out of the norm of the life cycle with a horrible, devastating disease, and I probably wasn't the nicest person people have ever met, or people perceive that, but underneath there was Jennifer, who cared immensely for the world and had great empathy for the world, particularly coming of age the way I did.
If I could just add one more thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't come up with this idea, but I can't remember who did. I think it's always is a really good question to ask when we're meeting anyone who's a patient or a client, is there anything specifically that we should know about you that will help us give you the best care possible?
That's a good question. Yeah.
And that is a wonderful place to bring some closure, but I want to get you out of the chair and get you back to Kirsten. And we are 5 minutes over.
So, and you gotta eat lunch.
I think, is there a last last thing that you want to say when you take off that role? You might want to get off the stage. I don't know what you want to do to
Oh, just I
come
think,
back to yourself.
I think when Kathy and I started brainstorming, you know, I see a gazillion people a year as a palliative care social worker, and I think this particular, I'm not even gonna call it case, this woman took me to an edge that I had never been in, and I think Andy can attest to that. You know, and the gift she's given me is, you know, as social workers, we're supposed to be in therapy, because how do you give when you're not receiving? And so I have found amazing therapists along the way, and I thank her for that. And I just think, and the gift the other day for yesterday, I saw her hospice nurse, and she and I were processing it. So there was a team of us having this shared journey, if you will, and this warm handoff. I think we did the best we could with what we had, you know. And Kathy asked me, and I mean, this is like money's stupid when you're talking about this stuff, but you know, her care cost $2,078,000.
Almost $300,000
for 355 days of care, which just speaks to how freaking cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs our healthcare system is. And
what could we have done with $300,000 for the last year of a person's life?
The apartment.
Just give it to her.
I know, exactly. So,
yes. So we are spending the money anyway, and
Yeah.
so I think it's
Just
very, very interesting. We wanted to do that, but I really want to thank you. And I think the other thing that you said to me last night, let's get down. Yes, we can fall down. Is that in this moment, this was a chance to give her a voice, and to do
just
it.
by doing, I think had she been here, I think Jennifer would have appreciated that we did this, and her legacy lives on, because she was so committed to, I don't know if underdog's the right word, but you know, those, the have and haves not. So, you know, we dedicate this
We dedicate this to her today, and she would have been very pleased in whatever way she is here that you have been a witness to this story today, and that it was used in a way in which to think about all the domains of care and how critical they are, not just one, but all of them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We kept you over. It's lunchtime. You're starting.